Ladies and gentlemen, to Carmine's Arena, a cultural gourmet of information, if you will, a feast for your mind and soul. And now, without further delay, the man, the myth, the maestro, Carmine Arena.
Greetings and welcome once again to Carmine's Arena, site of contest and conflict, venue for and of resolution. Resolution in terms of focus, remedy, and commitment both yours and mine to the preservation, the propagation, and indeed the celebration of Western civilization. Now, apart from his being a faithful listener, a listener of broad military, academic, and business experience, this loyal viewer frequently sends to me via email pertinent pieces reflective of our parasite-laden, victim-lamenting culture, which I've dog-eared and hope you, my viewers, overhear, so that said culture's picture becomes crystal clear, even to the weird who cling to their sad cheer. May we introduce you to a 20-year-old Princeton student. He's white, and so he's basically been preached to about his privileged existence. You know, simply for being white and also a student at an Ivy League university. In response to being told he's privileged because of his whiteness, he wrote the following piece. It appeared originally in the Princeton Tory, a hat tip and a bow to collegefix.com, where my respected viewer grabbed it and posted it to me in its entirety. It's epic, pragmatic, and double-quick authentic as against our culture's all too recently broken yardsticks and eccentric fiddlesticks. If in the end you can come to love this college kid, 'tis only because you're politically frigid. Listen as I now quote verbatim. There is a phase and a phrase that floats around college campuses, Princeton being no exception, that threatens to strike down opinions without regard for their merits, but rather solely on the basis of the person that voiced them. Check your privilege, the saying goes, and I have been reprimanded by it several times this year. The phrase handed down by my moral superiors descends recklessly like an Obama-sanctioned drone and aims laser-like at my pinkish peach complexion, my maleness, and the nerve I displayed in offering an opinion rooted in a personal world view. Check your privilege, they tell me, in a command that teeters between an imposition to actually explore how I got where I am and a reminder that I ought to feel personally apologetic because white males seem to pull most of the strings in the world. I do not accuse those who check me and my perspective of overt racism, although the phase which assumes that simply because I belong to a certain ethnic group, I should be judged collectively with it, toes that line. But I do condemn them for diminishing everything I have personally accomplished, all the hard work I have done in my life, and for ascribing all the fruit I reap, not to the seeds I sow, but to some invisible patron saint of white maleness, who places it out for me before I even arrive. Furthermore, I condemn them for casting the Equal Protection Clause, indeed the very idea of meritocracy, as a myth, and for declaring that we are all governed by invisible forces. Some would call them stigmas or societal norms. that our nation runs on racist and sexist conspiracies. Forget you didn't build that. Check your privilege and realize that nothing you have accomplished is real. But they can't be telling me that everything I've done with my life can't be credited to the racist patriarchy holding my hand throughout my years of education and eventually guiding me into Princeton. Even that is too extreme. So to find out what they are saying, I decided to take their advice. I actually went and checked the origins of my privileged existence to empathize with those whose underdog stories I can't possibly comprehend. I have unearthed some examples of the privilege with which my family was blessed. And now I think I better understand those who assure me that skin color allowed my family and I to flourish today. Perhaps it's the privilege my grandfather and his brother had to flee their home as teenagers when the Nazis invaded Poland, leaving their mother and 5 younger siblings behind, running and running until they reached a displaced persons camp in Siberia, where they would do years of hard labor in the bitter cold until World War II ended. Maybe it was the privilege my grandfather had of taking on the local rabbi's work in that DP camp, telling him that the spiritual leader should do hard work because he should save his energy to pass Jewish tradition along to those who might survive. Perhaps it was the privilege my great-grandmother and those 5 great-aunts and uncles I never knew, who had of being shot into an open grave outside their hometown. Maybe that's my privilege. Or maybe it's the privilege my grandmother had of spending weeks upon weeks on a death march through Polish forests in sub-zero temperatures, one of just a handful to survive, only to be put in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, where she would have died but for the Allied forces who liberated her and helped her regain her health when her weight dwindled to barely 80 pounds. Perhaps my privilege is that those 2 resilient individuals came to America with no money and no English, obtained citizenship, learned the language, and met each other. That my grandfather started a humble wicker basket business with nothing but long hours, an idea, and an iron will. Maybe my privilege is that they worked hard enough to raise 4 children and to send them to Jewish day school and eventually City College. Perhaps it was my privilege that my own father worked hard enough in City College to earn a spot at a top graduate school, got a good job, and for 25 years got up well before the crack of dawn, sacrificing precious time he wanted to spend with those he valued most, his wife and kids, to earn that living for them. I can say with certainty there was no legacy involved in any of this accomplishments. The wicker business just isn't that influential. Now, would you say that we've been really privileged? That our success has been gift-wrapped? That's the problem with calling someone out for the privilege which you assume has defined their narrative. You don't know what their struggles have been, what they may have gone through to be where they are. Assuming they benefited from power systems or other conspiratorial imaginary institutions denies them credit for all they've done, things of which you may not even conceive. You don't know whose father died defending your freedom. You don't know whose mother escaped oppression. You don't know who conquered their demons or may still be conquering them now. The truth is, though that is I have been exceptionally privileged in my life, albeit not in the way detractors would have it, it has been my distinct privilege that my grandparents came to America. First, that there was a place at all that would take them from the ruins of Europe. And second, that such a place was one where they could legally enter, learn the language, and acclimate to a society that ultimately allowed them to flourish. It was their privilege to come to a country that grants equal protection under the law to its citizens, that cares not about religion or race, but the contents of your character. It was my privilege that my grandfather was blessed with resolve and an entrepreneurial spirit, and that he was lucky enough to come to the place where he could realize the dream of giving his children a better life than he had. But far more important for me than his attributes was the legacy he sought to pass along, which forms the basis of what detractors call my privilege, but which actually should be praised as one of altruism and self-sacrifice. Those who came before us suffered for the sake of giving us a better life. When we similarly sacrifice for our descendants by caring for the planet, it's called environmentalism and is applauded. But when we do it by passing along property and a set of values, it's called privilege. And when we do it by raising questions about our crippling national debt, we're called Tea Party radicals. Such sacrifice of any form shouldn't be scorned, but admired. My exploration did yield results. I recognized that it was my parents' privilege, and now my own, that there is such a thing as an American dream, which is attainable even for a penniless Jewish immigrant. I am privileged that values like faith and education were passed along to me. My grandparents played an active role in my parents' education, and some of my earliest memories included learning the Hebrew alphabet with my dad. It's been made clear to me that education begins in the home, and the importance of parents' involvement with their kids' education. From mathematics, yes, from mathematics to morality. It cannot be overstated. It's not a matter of white or black, male or female, or any other division which we seek. Oh, we seek it so hungrily. It is a matter instead of the values that we pass along, the legacy we leave that perpetuates privilege. And there's nothing wrong with that. Behind every success, large or small, there is a story. And it isn't always told by sex or skin color. My appearance certainly doesn't tell the whole story. And to assume that it does, and that I should apologize for it, is insulting. While I haven't done everything for myself up to this point in my life, someone sacrificed themselves so that I can lead a better life. But that is a legacy I'm proud of. I have checked my privilege, and I apologize for nothing. Unquote. And thus by this well-thought-out piece was pierced by harpoon the leviathans of reverse prejudice and victimhood. Our Princetonian harpoonist also snags on his sharp hooks the ignorance of the learned, as exemplified by the terrorist Bill Ayers and his wife Bernadine Dawn, each raised to professorial rank, yet each a convicted felon who, like their many cohorts in academia, defend themselves by sending their brains out to play. Play, that is, with scrambled meanings of linguistics begrimed by Ivy League rhetoric, which equates, for example, bomb-making with civil disobedience, without nary a blink, and accuse their critics as those who invariably rob them of context. A no-no which otherwise would neuter their pretexts. Their hubris is comparable to Obama's bold narcissism, traits these closest friends hold in common. Ergo, 'tis quite plain to see why the learned are dogged by know-it-all ignorance. Their brain, let out to play, becomes an unwashed organ of cultural pollution, an intellectual delusion. It's B.O. forever attending the BS. Ignorance graduated to ignominy. Yes, as has been duly noted, unto cliché, each and every age gets the lunatics it deserves. Our age presently feeding insatiably on a pablum diet of racism, sexism, homophobia, and victimhood has gone bonkers. You see, reality gives them an indigestion. Noise is their tonic, political correctness their faith, and solitude, solitude another's pathology. Lost is a collective common sense. Culture's borders, boundaries, and reference points, which are selfhood's sovereignty, sanity, and beneficent legacy generously given and to be generously bequeathed. Academia's hot air will leave us only to inherit the wind. As you've heard me relate to you in past episodes, I am the happy legatee of a Judeo-Christian ethos which allows us to find and gather up the strength to resist adversity. A case in point is my maternal grandmother, Katie. Born in a Russian village in the 19th century, she experienced savage attacks from Cossacks on horseback, merrily slashing at Jews with razor-sharp sabers. In one of these random romps, Katie's brother was killed before her eyes. She fled and began wandering Europe. Though illiterate, unschooled, she learned to speak 6 other languages, coming at last to America, where without the quackery of bilingual education, learned to speak English, and ultimately opening a candy store and then a dress shop in Brooklyn. When I one day, at her request, taught her how to write her name, she stared at the printed letters, began to rock back and forth, laughing and crying in an unutterable harmony of meaning and melos. When I received a scholarship to college, she would walk some 2 miles, 2.5 miles, each Saturday morning, and kiss me awake in my bedroom. Too frugal to spend a coin on car fare, she would nonetheless hand me an envelope with her name, Katie, proudly printed on the flap. In it were greenbacks, which she handed over with the soft but earnest admonition, "Come, Endela, this money is for the books you'll need." She'd kiss my cheek again and say, "Make us proud." She was to die a year later. When slaves were freed some 200 years ago, the black race could boast of a deeply religious devoutness, producing the consummate heartfelt beauty of spirituals, the freedom-loving but disciplined musical traditions of gospel and jazz. There were infinitely less black mothers and dramatic low percentages of illegitimate births. Single mothers were at a minimum. This is curious given the way slave families were broken up, but a short time before. Today, long after the hideous, heartless conditions of slavery, we encounter the illegitimacy rates for blacks to have increased to a rate of 72%. Mother having become an adjective, rap celebrating the woman as a male's beast of burden, and a generational poverty hidden in welfare prepared for fanfare. Bondage no longer slavery, but mentality. I invite you to read and reread Ralph Ellison's book, The Invisible Man. Race baiters, black and white, hate this masterpiece. They hate it because it anticipates the persistence of race hustling. That Ellison, its black author, is scorned defines his spluttering critics who lack the genius of this great artist and literary stylist. Remember him, read him, and reflect on the letter of our Princetonian youth. Think of his true legacy. Remember him, read him, and also reflect on the letter earlier cited, written by that Princetonian youth, that can be found on collegefix.com. And yes, won't you please remember my grandma, Katie? a woman who knew adversity, but never defeat. She remains bigger than her history, bigger than her disproportionate misery. It was her ethos and those like her that gave Western civilization its legacy. Do you hear that? That's what this program is all about. Over 100 episodes. I've tried to relate this legacy to you, despite its flaws. It is a gleaming reward for those who reach out to take it and not regard it with the contempt for others they call privilege, while they wallow in victimhood and seem to enjoy it, might I add. Till next time, keep hold of your legacy and keep the faith.
If you have any comments or other remarks, and that I perhaps could even read on some of these broadcasts, please do not hesitate to write to me, Carmine Arena, P.O. Box 1029, Larchmont, New York 10538.